June 7th meeting of the Planning Commission to order at 9:05. For roll call, we are just at a quorum. We knew Commissioner Purnell wasn't going to be here. We're not clear about Commissioner Nelson. And we don't have our timber rep, and I don't know, maybe in the director's report you can give us some heads up about if you've heard any stirrings about that. So that's the roll call. Do we have a determination of legal notice?
All items have been properly noticed.
Is this when I'm supposed to say about hearing things with just a quorum? About that we're just at quorum, so decisions have to be. Yes. So anyway, because we are just 4 people, all decisions have to be unanimous, and it is optional for applicants to choose to be heard at another time if they would prefer that.
So if I may, an applicant can ask for a continuance based on this, but yes, Madam Chair, you are correct.
Is there a director's report?
A very brief one, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Ash Gonzalez, Interim Director. As always, I give you the update on what's going on with the fires and what's going on as far as our involvement. And basically where we're at today is we have issued a total of 72 building permits in the burn area. We have 11 in the queue. The 72 include single-family residences, a combine of manufactured homes and stick-built homes and so on. One of the issues that had come up previously was the over-excavation issue. The Office of Emergency Services, State of California, stepped in to handle that with private contractor, and basically they were coming in and dealing with the over-excavation that the Army Corps had done. And so what they ended up doing is they took in basically applications that they reviewed to determine whether or not they were eligible for a over-excavation. They took in, I believe, 121. They determined that 79 properties were eligible, and at this point, we have issued 55 grading permits, and they have had 25 properties completed. My understanding is they're trying to work to try to get everything done through the end of the month. As far as the Army Corps, we are only waiting on one clearance letter from the Army Corps, and that will complete the Army Corps' assignment in the county. That does it for that. And then at the last meeting, the Planning Commission had inquired about what was going on at the Masonite site. And I've indicated that there were a number of building permits and grading permits that were issued. And just for the Commission's interest, you should all have maps that were produced that actually will show you on a parcel by parcel basis the types of building permits. Most of these are grading permits in the winery that's out there, but I wanted to, pass this out to you so that you would have an idea of what's happening. There is a lot of activity out there, and so you will see trucks coming in and out of there. And again, it's for grading issues, a winery, commercial grading to fill in depressions throughout the area. And so again, I just wanted to make sure that the Commission had a visual representation on what's going out there. So basically what's going on out there is under permits.
I'm sorry, is what under?
Under permits.
Under permits.
Yes. And there's a lot of activity out there, so we're, like I said, monitoring what's happening.
I'm so glad it's filling up, though. That's really good.
Well, there's activity. I mean, like I said, a lot of what you'll see in the beginning is grading to basically address the depressions, and then at some point we'll begin to see development come in the future.
I see where one of these says Maverick Sawyer. Do you know if Maverick may be considering relocating, or?
I don't know what they're going to do. I think this is just a This is on one of the vineyard properties. This is just Charlie Sawyer. So most of these are, like I said, other than the Big Daddy and the winery, most of these others are just grading.
Thank you.
And then this past week, the board conducted budget hearings. So again, our recommended budget has been processed and approved along with all of the other departments' budgets. So one of the things that I'll be bringing forward to the board will be a work program of many of the projects that we really need to start moving forward with, which would include ADUs. We actually have the inland ADU ordinance that we're working on now. We went to the board for direction on that, and it's going to be a combination of both the accessory dwelling units and vacation rentals. That's inland. So what we're also looking at doing is, as part of the work program in this next fiscal year, is tackle ADUs in the coastal zone. And so Mr. Kinzer and I have already had preliminary discussions with the Coastal Commission, and we have an idea of what they would like to see, but we're also going to begin the actual process of working on the LCP amendment and the ordinance changes so we can get that going this summer. The other thing that we're looking at is the regulations for cannabis in the coastal zone. That will also begin later this summer in the coastal zone. And then some of the other topics that we need to address is oak woodland mitigation measures that are called for in the general plan. And some of the areas that we're also looking at is some UVAP and general plan cleanup items. So we'll be looking at those items as well. So we'll be pulling together a variety of items and bringing a work plan together to the board. And I'll also share that with the Planning Commission as well, because this will give you an idea of some of the projects that we have coming forward. In essence, since I've been gone, we have not had any long-range planning in the county. And part of my goal is to reactivate long-range planning in the county. Now that we're staffing up, I'd like to work with the staff in the department and actually work on trying to put together a couple of folks in long-range planning so we can actually deal with some of these tasks that are overdue. So with that, that concludes my director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
My own question is if you have any sense when the Board of Supervisors will appoint Commissioner Kruger's replacement.
I do not know. I know that they've got one name now, and that is being considered. I know that it's a priority, but I couldn't tell you when.
The new commissioner is on the June 19th board agenda.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have a question of the director, if I might. Director Gonzalez?
Yes.
I had
Wait, done yet?
a question, I'm sorry.
No, I'm not leaving. I was just
Oh,
going to
good.
post one of these
Okay.
in the back for the public's availability.
I just wondered if you have a guess at a timeline for the Lover's Lane project that's going to be coming.
The project was put on hold by the applicant back at the end of March. One of the issues is the affordability, the housing affordability alternative plan to the inclusionary housing program. That is something that they chose to put on hold to work on. So at this point, until they reactivate the project, I couldn't give you a timeline. I can tell you that the EIR consultant has done the peer review of their studies, but again, they're on hold at this point in time. So what would need to happen once the project is reactivated is basically firm up the alternative plan, firm up the project description because we need the alternative housing plan, and then the next thing that would need to occur would be to schedule a scoping meeting for the public as well as public agencies, and then at that point we would then have a better timeline for when the project would actually hit a public hearing schedule.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I have one last question. Oh, you did too. Go ahead.
I was just curious, Nash, you mentioned about long-range planning with the department, and I know there in the past been quite a bit of turnover, and I wondered how your department was doing with hopefully long-term employees.
Yeah, at this point, we have hired quite a few planners. One of the things that the board did a couple of months ago is they did raise the salaries for planners and building inspectors to make them commensurate with a salary study that they did. So salaries did go up between 18 and 30%, and that actually, we hope that will create a retention as well as the ability to recruit. We're currently recruiting for one additional planner, well, not additional, a replacement planner for our Fort Bragg office, because we did lose a planner over in the Fort Bragg office. So one of the things that we're doing right now is we're cross-training staff. We're actually sending staff from Ukiah over to Fort Bragg. We're trying to get Fort Bragg folks trained in what Ukiah does. So we're trying to create this cross-pollination right now of staffing so that Ukiah folks can do CDPs. Eventually, folks in Fort Bragg will be able to process a lot of the types of permits that come before the commission. Building inspectors, it's the same thing. We're doing this cross-training. Our building official has implemented a cross-training program to where we're taking plan checks from Ukiah to Fort Bragg to Ukiah, and back and forth, so that staff will be well-rounded in the ability to perform functions that are done in both offices. So as far as budget, those vacancies that we had, which included planners, will not be filled to be able to balance the budget. But we're not going to lose anybody that we have now. So we still, are looking at trying to get more people trained up on all of the applications and projects that previously were being handed over to consultants to do. So we found some inefficiencies there where we were actually getting, as I called it, 60% of what we should have been getting, 95 to 99% delivery. That wasn't happening. And so now staff is working on that so that we have a better, I'll call it more ownership of the project. And so we begin to see less and less errors now.
Excellent, thank you. I'm glad to hear that.
My last thing was just a question. We did talk about at some point having a presentation about the inland groundwater study.
Meeting will be canceled.
Yeah, so that, again, we'll work on some presentations. The other thing that I still am trying to work on is trying to get a presentation by the Little Lake Fire Chief to come in and talk about the cannabis processing and some of the things that they've encountered. So we're still trying to get some items here. And my goal is to try to also, at some point this next year, is to set aside one planning commission meeting for, I'll call it a workshop of planning items, more of an educational topics than anything else, because it's something we haven't done in a long time.
Excellent.
I support that.
Excellent.
Yeah. This way, when we get our new commissioner on board, this way we can go ahead and plan for something like that. Something like the 3 new hot topics in planning, or some of the issues that are coming down the pike, and so on.
Sounds good, thank you. Any other questions for the director? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now is the time for matters from the public. The Planning Commission welcomes participation in commission meetings. This item is limited to matters under the jurisdiction of the commission that are not on the posted agenda, and items which have not already been considered by the commission. No action will be taken. Is there anyone who wishes to address the commission? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent calendar, which has no items. So we will move to the regular calendar and begin with case U 2016-004.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Bill Kinzer, Mendocino Planning and Building Services. This is a request by California Department of Transportation for a coastal development use permit to install upgraded radio equipment within an existing building and attach a new antenna to to the mast of the outside of the building. It's located at the Point Arena Lighthouse. The graphic up above shows the project location relative to the lighthouse, down near the end of the Lighthouse Road. The overall site is 28 acres. The land use and zoning for the property is open space. The area is both highly scenic and it's also a bluff top parcel, so it's an appealable area. The environmental determination is it's a categorical exemption on this because of a minor facility at Class 1. The applicant has stated that the existing radio antenna doesn't meet current needs and needs to be upgraded. When we look at the typical elements, the 10 elements that we often look at for a coastal development permit or a use permit, I think we're on. Of the 10, there are 5 that are of interest on this particular one. Is it consistent with the land use and zoning? Is it consistent with the visual impact, visual qualities, natural habitats, and then archaeological resources? The other issues don't, groundwater and transportation aren't really affected by this. Staff finds it consistent with the land use plan. It's open space, particularly consistent with the zoning. We're doing this because it's a minor impact utility, and a minor impact utility requires a conditional use permit to be approved. So that's why we're doing the use permit. It's also in a highly scenic area, so any additional structure would also require a coastal development permit. The 16-foot antenna is lower than the maximum height allowed in that building of that district of 18 feet. Visual resources, staff finds that it's consistent with their visual resource policies. It's less than 18 feet at 16 feet. We think it'll have a minimal or provide for protection of coastal views. I have a handout that I believe you have that in fact summarizes better than anything I can say what this is about, and I think you can see there on that. And then the third determination in the highly scenic areas, be subordinate to natural settings and not be a reflective surface. It would be behind the building as you currently see it. This is a graphic of what you have in your handout as well, from front and back. That's currently, and then there would be one more added to it. The project in terms of ESHA is the biological study done by the applicant showed that it was located 100 feet distant from any ESHAs that would not impact. The report went to the Archaeological Commission, and we have the standard condition as well as a condition that the recommendations of the archaeological report be adhered to. And those are the key issues for this for the property. Staff would recommend that the Planning Commission approve with the conditions.
Any questions for Mr. Kinzer? Thank you. Is there a representative of the applicant here? Yes. If you have anything you would like to let us know, this is your opportunity to do it.
I'd like to add that this area is very difficult for...
Could you come up to the microphone so you can be on the record?
And state your name.
1, 2. I just wanted to add that this area for us, for maintenance crews, is very difficult to attend to on communications. We depend a lot on our two-way radio operations for safety of our employees and safety of the traveling public. So it's very critical to us. And this area in particular is very difficult to provide communications to, as you probably know already.
Could you state your name for the...
Yeah, my name is Javier Del Rio, and I am with Maintenance Radio Communications in Caltrans.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant? No. Are there any members of the public who would like to address this issue? Open the public hearing, and seeing no one, we will close the public hearing. Any more questions for applicant or staff before we bring it back to the commission?
Me.
Okay, any discussion amongst commissioners?
Well, I'll just say it's, in my mind, it's kind of always too bad when we have to, on that beautiful coastline, have towers of any size. But I understand their need, and so I can't disagree with that.
I just had one question on the actual photograph, the aerial photograph, and it looks like the boundaries are way outside the actual property. I'm wondering if that's coastal erosion. One more back, that one.
I think that's just an overlay of the zoning district. That's not absolutely
I just wondered if that
up.
was like all washing away or something.
Yeah, no. I think it's just it's just not quite exact. Although there certainly would be, you know, given a good storm, it would be different than it was last year.
It looks like it's fallen away. So, okay, just a question. With that, I think we might be ready for a motion.
By resolution, the Planning Commission grants the coastal development use permit for this project as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval.
Second.
Commissioner Ogle?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
Commissioner Warner?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Chair Holdcamp?
Yes,
Motion carries 5-0.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I guess I should say Commissioner Nelson has joined us.
Yes.
Quite a while ago, but never let it be said that I'm totally late. All right, we will go to case U 2016-0013.
Thank you, Julia Acker, Senior Planner. So I will just briefly run through this item. It is also a fairly straightforward item with not a lot of issues in terms of Coastal Act consistency or LCP consistency. So this is a coastal development use permit to construct a duplex for use as farm labor housing. There was an existing 400 square foot mobile home and an existing travel trailer and sheds that are proposed to be demolished or removed from the property. And then the proposed new duplex would be connected to the existing utilities. So the site is located in the coastal zone. It's about a mile south of Manchester on the west side of Highway 1 and about 200 feet south of the intersection of Highway 1 with Stoneboro Road, which is a county road, and located at 20800 South Highway 1. So with regards to land use and zoning, the property is classified and zoned as agricultural with a 60-acre minimum parcel size, and farm labor housing is a permissible use type subject to a conditional use permit. So that is why it is in front of you today. The proposed project is consistent with all the development standards for the ag district, including yard setbacks as well as height limitations, and so as well as lot coverage as well too. So there is no conditions necessary to ensure consistency with that. For biological resources, the site, since it had existing development, staff conferred with California Department of Fish and Wildlife staff just to determine whether or not a biological scoping survey should be required, and both staff and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife agreed that would not be necessary for this project given the limited scope of development in an already developed area. The site is within the habitat range of the Point Arena mountain beaver, which is the federally listed endangered species. So there was consultation with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they ultimately came out and conducted a habitat assessment and presence absence survey in May of 2017. And there was some suitable habitat, but they said there was no evidence of Point Arena mountain beaver occupancy. So there's no issue with regards to natural resources at the site. The site is west of Highway 1 and is located in an area that's designated as highly scenic. So with that, typically when you're west of Highway 1, you'd have a height limitation of 18 feet unless you can demonstrate that the height of the proposed structure would not be out of character with structures on surrounding properties or obstruct public views to and along the coastline. So with this, staff, I'm very familiar with this area, and I know in this particular location, the proposed height of 20 feet for the structure is not going to cause a significant impact, nor be out of character with that on adjacent properties in terms of the development that exists in the area. Actually, many of the structures in the area are much taller than this site will be. So the site is entirely visible from Highway 1 and also from the adjacent county road, which is Stoneboro Road. There is an existing Monterey cypress stand, and it provides a beneficial visual screening for the site. So staff is recommending a condition that that vegetation be maintained for the life of the project. Now, Monterey cypress is a non-native species, and also invasive. So therefore, staff recommends that should any trees die or become diseased, that they be replaced with native plants, subject to review and approval by Department of Planning and Building Services, as well as the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's no real potential hazards other than, our standard that we're in Mendocino County. We have the San Andreas Fault, and that we could be subject to ground shaking as a result of if there was an earthquake event. So, but there's no other hazards associated with the site, and there was a CAL FIRE preliminary clearance obtained, and the applicant will be in conformance with all those recommendations. This site is a very level parcel, so there's going to be very minimal ground disturbance required to accommodate the development, so staff is just recommending standard best management practices during the construction activities. Additionally, for archaeological resources, there was no real potential in this particular area, so they are just advised of the discovery clause at this time, and so if resources are identified, then they will contact our office for the appropriate procedures. With regards to groundwater resources, there was the need to do the septic evaluation, which was received by Environmental Health, and the applicant received clearance on that in just April of this last year. Additionally, there's no water testing requirements, so that was determined by Environmental Health that for this proposed use, there was no water testing requirements. And as I said previously, the proposed duplex will be hooked up to the existing utilities at the site. With regard to transportation and circulation, while this is a new development on the site, there was already previously existing development, and so the impacts to local roadways would be very minimal from the addition of one additional dwelling unit on this site, and also that these densities were considered at the time that the local coastal program was adopted, and so there's no concern about the existing roadways being inadequate for the development. Now, there is an existing access off of Highway 1, but there are some comments from Caltrans that they would like to have some improvements done to that existing access. So those have been recommended in the conditions of approval. Since this site is west of Highway 1, we always have to consider public access and whether or not there's any sort of obstruction or need to require additional public access as a result of this project. And there's already existing public access on Stoneboro Road, so there's no concern or requirement that this applicant provide any additional access, and it won't conflict with any of the existing access. Since this site is zoned agricultural, there are additional findings that are required anytime you are looking to develop on an agriculturally zoned property. And so with this, I'll just kind of go through the kind of paragraph that I had written on this in the staff report that just highlights how the project is consistent with that ag district. So since the lot is zoned agricultural, it's also surrounded by all agricultural and rangeland parcels. The site itself is not actually designated as prime agricultural land. It is actually non-prime agricultural land. And additionally, that the development of the 2 farm labor housing units is really going to be supportive of the adjacent agricultural uses and will allow those to continue at the site. So the question of whether or not the proposed use is compatible with the long-term protection of resource lands is that yes, it is, because it will allow the continuance of those resource lands to be utilized in that way. So that concludes my presentation. I will just add that this staff has determined the project to be categorically exempt from CEQA, which allows for up to 4 dwelling units to be constructed on a parcel without triggering the need for an initial study or a negative declaration or mitigated negative declaration. So staff recommends approval, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay. Is the applicant present or the applicant's representative?
Good morning. I'm James Barrett. I represent the Stornettas in this application, and thank you for the staff report, Julia, and thank you, Julia, for being our fourth planner that got us finally moving on this project. It's almost 2 years, but we understand the requirements of the coastal zone and how long things take to get things done. First of all, I would like to say that, you know, it's no different on the coast than it is here. We have a critical housing shortage in the South Coast, and particularly critical to anybody that's in agriculture, because they have the need to house their employees. And so this is an attempt to do that. Julia's worked on this with this particular one. It's a duplex that we have built successfully in Philo and in Boonville for Roeder and Schaffenberger wineries. We have 4 more going in that area for them. And Bill Kinzer is working on 3 other applications for ag employee housing in the South Coast for the Stornettas. So they won't, that particular application won't be coming before you because they're all on separate ranches and individual units. So they'll be handled strictly by the zoning administrator through their hearing process. So we're anxious to get those done. We do have a very critical housing shortage for their full-time employees. They employ between 20 and 30 employees in the dairy business. They have, I think last count with our last purchase, which was the Galletti property in Elk, I think we have either 9 or 10 individual ranches that have been acquired over the years. That is somewhat helpful because these individual ranches most of the time have a family home on them or some other type of dwelling unit. So they've been able to survive because of that. We did lose one of our housing units on the Biaggi dairy last year. A tragic situation happened there. There were people lost their lives in it. So we haven't been able to replace that particular housing unit that was lost there. The Stornettas, I think, are the only 2 dairies in Mendocino County left, organic dairies for milk cows. Lance doesn't like for me to tell you how many cows he has, but let me tell you that they are operating nearly to a 4-figure number on their cattle and dairy operation. They do have the home ranch dairy, which has been there for some time. As a matter of fact, the home ranch covers most of the area to the north and the east here, and then the south is the Giacomini ranch that they acquired some years back. So they completely surround this particular small piece of property where we'd like to put the duplex. They purchased this particular piece of property that has a historical use of non-agriculture. It was the sand and gravel operation a couple of owners back in the 60s. So you can see the evidence of that there today. They did a lot of filling of sand and gravel where they did the operation. So there's an overlay of a couple of feet of probably sand and gravel on most of the site project. There's a water storage tank there, and I think we calculated at about 20,000 gallons that they obviously used in that sand and gravel operation. And so the Stornettas, like I say, bought this when it became available in the I think it was 2000 with this particular type of a project in mind to clean it up and to try to do some farm housing on it. So I think that's all I need to say. Give you a little background on it. We'd like to proceed with this and get rolling on it. The typical floor plan that I've given you is what we've already developed, like I say, in other areas successfully. And so it'll be something very similar to that: 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And these are all for permanent type family situations. And that's what most of their employees are, and not similar to the vineyard, which you have a lot of transition in vineyard workers. So as Mr. Nelson knows. And so we'd ask for you to, give us approval. We think we can comply with all of the conditions that staff has recommended, and hopefully have a good, successful rest of the year in completing the project. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions for the applicant? Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Jim, I was a little, well, first of all, I want to ask a question. Who's the other dairy?
The other dairy, we have the one on the Biaggi dairy,
Oh, okay.
and then the home dairy.
So,
The Biaggi dairy they bought a few years back. It was owned by a Southern California owner that had actually almost stopped use of that. It didn't stop long enough for us to keep and maintain it as a dairy, as a non-conforming use. And so they have that they operate out of.
okay, because I thought you said there were 2 dairies left in
Mendocino County, and I think those are the only two.
the
Yes,
Biaggi
they
and-
have the only 2, and organic, and so they
Oh,
do
okay.
go through a big process in maintaining this organic stature and status for their milk.
And the only other question I had, and maybe I'm visualizing this wrong, but and you did mention it too, there's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, but in the 2-bedroom, unless I'm looking at this wrong, I only see 1 bathroom. Can you help me out with that?
Maybe that's what we have, 2-bedroom, 1 bath. That sounds more logical.
Okay.
You
That
are
would be-
correct.
yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
there is only 1 bathroom in there.
Okay, so I don't know if that needs to be corrected in the,
Yeah, this is a typical floor plan. We might have to modify depending on where we put it on the lot and the orientation that they want, but that's the one that we've used very successfully. We've tried to stay away from what we would prefer, and most would prefer is a 3-bedroom and then 2 studios for that type of housing need. But immediately you're into ADA requirements with the 3-bedroom and 2 studios. So we had to build one that way, which doesn't work out as far as being able to do affordable housing.
interesting, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
At this point, we will open the public hearing on this item. If anyone, members of the public care to comment? Seeing no one, we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any comments, questions, motions?
Seems like a great project.
Yeah?
Yeah, I agree, and I'm really pleased to see a little more, be it little, but at least a little more affordable housing.
Right.
Especially in that area,
Oh,
very
yes.
desperate.
Well, in the absence of other comment, by resolution, the Planning Commission adopts a categorical exemption and grants U-216-003 for the project as proposed by the applicant based on the facts and findings and subject to the conditions of approval.
Second?
Commissioner Ogle,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Warner,
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson,
Yes.
Chair Holtcamp.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Before we do that, you want a break? Anybody care for a break?
Sure.
Okay, we're gonna just take a brief rest break if that'd be all right.
Always.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Planning Commission is back in order, and we will be moving to case MS 2017-0002. Mr. Dostalik.
Am I on? Good. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Robert Dostalik, Staff Planner. The project before you is the proposed Alvarez Minor Subdivision. And this position a little better. The project site is located just south of the Ukiah city limits, Crestview Drive, and involves a subdivision of an existing approximately, excuse me, 3.4 acre parcel into 3 new parcels of 0.61 acres and a 1.14 acre parcel and a remainder parcel of 1.66 acres plus or minus. And it should also be noted that the project also includes a request for an exception to reduce the required roadway access width from 60 feet down to 55 feet. So it's a separate component. And a little bit about the site. There are 2, I don't have my laser pointer, but I think just describing it, you'll be able to get the idea. There are 2 existing residential structures, 1 single-family dwelling and 1 guest cottage located in the northwest corner of the project site, and that would be on what would become proposed parcel 1. And a drainage easement traverses much of the property from east to west, and significant slopes are present, 30% plus on the northwestern portion of the parcel, and which provides some constraints actually. And proposed parcel 2 and the remainder parcel would take access off of an existing paved private driveway that extends from Crestview Drive. So it almost goes in that little flag portion of the lot. And the project site is located within the Willow County Water District and the Ukiah Valley Sanitation Service areas, and existing residential development surrounds the project site. Here. The project would be consistent with the general plan and Ukiah Valley area plan designation of suburban residential, and would adhere to the 6,000 square foot minimum lot area requirement for the single family residential zone district. And the project was reviewed by the County Subdivision Committee in November of 2017, at which time conditional approval is recommended to the Planning Commission. And an exception, as mentioned before, to the Division of Land Regulations has been submitted by the applicant to reduce portions of the private access easement width from the required 60 feet to 55 feet. And that's namely in that narrow portion where the lot configuration just squeezes it a little bit. So it's only for a brief portion. And as mentioned, the configuration of the parcel boundaries would restrict that narrow portion on the eastern third of the parcel. And the requested easement has been deemed acceptable by the Mendocino County Department of Transportation and the Ukiah Valley Fire District. And DOT is also amenable to a 30-foot half-width easement where the center line of the existing access easement falls on the southern property line. And that's on the southwestern portion. Otherwise, the 60-foot width easement can be accommodated for all other portions of the property or for the project. And the project, as such, the project would be consistent with the County Land Division regulations. And for environmental protection, an initial study for the proposed project was completed in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act. Staff did not identify any potentially significant impacts to the environment which would result from the project that would require mitigation. Therefore, a negative declaration was prepared. And I believe you were all distributed a memo with a couple of attachments, so I'll go into those. And so there are some additions to the staff report and the resolution. And I'll actually read the resolution portion into the record first, which is item 2 on the memo, and then I'll go ahead and conclude with the recommendation. So the revisions to the resolution to fortify number 3 in the findings, the Division of Land Regulations. I'll just read it all the way through and you can see the underlined portions. The project is consistent with Chapter 17 of the Mendocino County Code, Division of Land Regulations. The project includes an exception to Section 17-48.5 A1I and 17-66 of the Division of Land Regulations to reduce the roadway easement width from the required 60 feet to 55 feet. The site is physically suitable for the proposed subdivision, including the exception, and the design would not result in nuisances or serious public health concerns. The site is also suitable for the resulting density of development. And then going on to the back page, an additional finding was added to ensure consistency with the Ukiah Valley Area Plan. And number 4 reads as such. Ukiah Valley Area Plan UVAP consistency findings. The proposed minor subdivision is located within the UVAP area and is consistent with the goals and policies contained in the UVAP, or the Ukiah Valley Area Plan. And with that, to provide additional language in the recommendation, I'll read it into the record. So this is staff's recommendation. By resolution, the Planning Commission adopt the negative declaration and grant minor subdivision MS 2017-0002 with an exception to sections 17-48.5A1I and 17-66 of the Division of Land Regulations to reduce the roadway easement width from the required 60 feet to 55 feet, as proposed by the applicant, based on the facts and findings, and subject to the conditions of approval in Exhibit A. And otherwise, that concludes staff's presentation, and we're available for questions.
Is anyone here from the applicant? So I guess I'm going to ask you. I visited that site, and there is no street signage, no numbering. Is that something we impose by condition? That is a very high fire risk, being such steep land.
We do have some conditions that would assist with that, and actually we do have a staff member with DOT that may be able to speak a little bit more on that particular aspect.
Okay. That was my only real concern about the site, but when I went looking for it, there are no numbers.
Sure.
Is this on? Yeah. Good morning, Amber Munoz, Department of Transportation. There actually is a CAL FIRE recommendation for them to provide numbering signs. We did not recommend a private road naming petition because of the existing residences already on that road, and we didn't want them to have to change their addresses. But that could be an option if the commission desires. But there is a condition that says they would need to follow the recommendations of CAL FIRE, and that was one of the recommendations.
Okay, it didn't specifically say about the numbers, so I just wanted to check.
Do you have any more questions for me? Thank you.
And commissioners, if I may just add, what Ms. Muniz was speaking of is captured in Condition 8 as it speaks to compliance with the CAL FIRE preliminary clearance.
Okay. It's a fairly intensely populated area, and yet a lot of that.
That's correct.
Yes.
I actually have a little question about parcel 1. It looks like it's rather steep to get to. And where would the driveway access be?
Yes, so a separate driveway would be provided from Crestview Drive that would serve exclusively parcel 1.
Oh,
and,
okay.
and there's a condition from DOT that requires a standard driveway approach.
So that's to the north?
That's correct.
Okay.
If I had the, yeah, in the northwest corner, correct. The parcel with the existing development on it, correct.
Okay.
And that driveway is there, but unmarked.
And it may be informal.
There's currently a driveway.
Okay. Improve it to current DOT standards, correct.
And they'll be required to put an address on it then, Robert? Or Amber? Okay. Thank you. Not a big deal, but in the first request, it I'm kind of anal about this. Anyway, it says to reduce the required 6 foot. That should say 60 on page, well, the first page of the summary.
That is correct.
Yeah, it's not a
it
big-
was noticed correctly, though. The request in our public notices was correct. So.
Thank you. And then the other question I had, and I apologize, I have not been to the site. What would be parcel 3? It's pretty tiny to read. Yeah, parcel 3, where that flag comes out where the driveway is going to be, the proposed driveway, or I guess there's a road there now. According to this, what's it called, aerial imagery, it looks like there's a building that is on the south side of that flag that is on 2 properties. Is that right? Or?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Ogle. Actually, this might be a similar circumstance that you were speaking of with that occurred with Mr. Kinzer's project, where the overlay of the boundary there's some margin of error, so it may appear to be overlapping.
And it looked like a shed to me, not a dwelling or anything like that.
And I should also add that there'll be parcels 1 and 2, and the parcel that you're speaking of would actually be the remainder.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess I need stronger glasses here. It was hard to determine. I see where parcel 1's the northwest, parcel 2's the southwest, parcel 3 in the middle. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused here.
Parcel 3 would almost be the entire eastern portion of the project site, and that's where the most constraints are.
So where's the existing parcel then?
The parcel with the existing development on it is parcel 1, and that's in the northwest corner. Actually, I can show you. This would be parcel 1.
Okay. And then, if I understood you right, Robert, and I'm sorry, I'm a little unclear on it, but it's proposed for a 55-foot driveway or roadway coming in, and then where it jogs up there, I guess, is that where it goes down to, I think you said 30 feet? Is that it?
Maybe I can show you from here. So this would be the portion where it's 55, and then down in this area would be where there'd be the 30-foot half easement, because the other portion of the easement is on a different property, or different ownership, I should say.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing no representative of the applicant, I guess we'll skip that part and open the public hearing if there is any public comment on this item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Any further comments, questions?
I move the recommended motion that's already been read.
Cheating. Second.
Commissioner Ogle?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
Commissioner Warner?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Chair Holdcamp?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. At this point, are there any matters from staff that you would care to bring up?
Just to confirm that the July 5th Planning Commission meeting is canceled.
There are no other matters from staff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any matters from the commission? Okay, with that, we will move on to the approval first of the February 15th, 2018 minutes. Any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I'd move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor of approval of the February 15th minutes?
Aye.
Aye. And then we have another set that is the April 5th, 2018 minutes. Any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I'll move approval of
Did
the
I miss
April 5th
something?
minutes.
I'll second again.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Madam Chairman, you know how to run a meeting. Hour and 5 minutes.